In the heart of Africa, nestled between rugged mountains and lush forests, lies the small, poverty-stricken village of Nyarega. The villagers live a life of hardship, relying on farming and subsistence living, struggling to make ends meet. Despite the beauty of their surroundings, the villagers are trapped in a cycle of poverty, unable to break free from the deep-rooted challenges that define their daily lives. Among the people of Nyarega, there lived a young woman named Amina. Her home was a small, humble hut made of mud and thatch. The walls of the hut were cracked, and the roof leaked when it rained. But what weighed most heavily on Amina's heart was not the physical poverty, but the emotional and spiritual poverty she felt, a void that could never seem to be filled. Amina's grandmother, Binta, had raised her with an iron hand, teaching her not just the skills of survival, but a cold and brutal way of life. Children are not to be kept, they are to be sold, Binta would say, passing down a cruel family tradition that had been handed down for generations. Amina learned that life was not about love or care for the newborns, but about using them as a means to escape the crushing poverty that held the family in its grip. From the time she was a child, Amina had seen how Binta worked. She had sold her own children, never showing the maternal warmth that the world expected. Instead, she sold them as commodities, using the money to buy things that offered her fleeting comfort, chiefly, drugs that numbed her from the harshness of their reality. Amina never questioned this path. She accepted it as her fate, and as she grew older, she began to adopt the same mindset. As Amina grew older, she became acutely aware of the extreme poverty surrounding her. It wasn't just her family, almost everyone in Nyarega was struggling. The women worked long hours in the fields, and the men did what they could, often leaving the village in search of work. But the pay was never enough, and the constant hunger and lack of resources seemed to weigh down on everyone, leaving no room for hope or dreams. Amina's own life was shaped by these harsh realities. By the time she was a teenager, she understood that survival meant making choices that no one should have to make. She learned that in order to secure the next meal or the next bit of comfort, she had to become numb to the pain of what she was doing. And so, when Amina reached the age of maturity, her grandmother began pushing her toward the same terrible fate. Amina would have to sleep with many men, sometimes as many as 5 or 6 in a month, to get pregnant. The men were local villagers, strangers who came to her with the promise of temporary pleasure, but whose intentions were far from kind. She allowed herself to be used, seeing it as the only way to survive. Each time she became pregnant, the hope of a new life briefly flickered in her heart, only to be extinguished when she realized the child's fate. Once the baby was born, she would sell it. The price she received for the newborn would vary, sometimes only enough to buy a small quantity of the drugs she craved. Amina would take the money, always telling herself that it was for survival, that the drugs would make the pain bearable. But the emptiness never went away. Inside, Amina struggled with her actions. She hated herself for selling her children, for turning her back on the natural bond a mother was supposed to have with her child. But the drugs numbed that guilt, and for a fleeting moment, she could forget. She told herself that this was the way of the world, the way things had always been. If she wanted to live, to survive, this was the price she had to pay. The cycle was never ending. Every pregnancy felt like another chance to escape, another opportunity to numb herself. She longed for something more, for love, for a way out, but she couldn't see how to escape the traps that had been set for her. The men she slept with were indifferent, the drugs were always temporary, and the babies, her own flesh and blood, were treated like merchandise, nothing more than a means to an end. Then one day, everything changed when Michael came to Nyarega. He was a businessman, a man of wealth, who had traveled to the village with a mission, to invest in the area, to build schools, and to bring economic opportunities to the people. Michael had a vision of a better life for the villagers, but he did not know the deep-seated darkness that lingered just beneath the surface. When Michael first laid eyes on Amina, he saw only beauty. He was drawn to her strength, her intelligence, and the way she carried herself, despite the hardships she faced. To him, Amina was a symbol of hope, someone he could help, someone he could love. Over time, Michael and Amina spent more time together. He courted her, showing her kindness and affection that she had never known. He promised her a life of stability, of love, and of security. Amina, desperate for change, began to believe that perhaps Michael could offer her the future she had always dreamed of. She began to hope that she could escape her past and build a new life with him. Amina's life seemed to transform overnight. She moved into Michael's home, a beautiful house with high walls and a lush garden. There was food on the table every day, clean water, and the comforts of a life she had never known. Michael loved her deeply, and she felt cherished in a way she had never thought possible. For the first time, she imagined a life beyond selling babies, beyond the addiction that had been her constant companion. But despite the comforts of her new life, Amina could not escape her past. The temptations never ceased. She found herself pregnant again, and despite her promises to Michael, the old habits resurfaced. The child was born, and with it came the familiar urge to sell it, to use the money for the drugs she craved. Michael never knew, and Amina told herself she was doing it for survival, for comfort. But each time, the guilt weighed heavier on her soul. As the months passed, Michael grew increasingly suspicious. Amina's behavior became erratic. She would lock herself away for hours, her eyes distant, and she became colder toward him. She would slip away into the night, and when she returned, she seemed even more withdrawn. One evening, while Michael was searching for a lost letter in Amina's drawer, he discovered the truth. Hidden beneath a stack of old papers was a large sum of money, money that could only have come from selling a child. Michael's world collapsed as the realization hit him. Michael confronted Amina, his voice filled with a mix of anger and betrayal. How could she do this after everything he had given her? He asked her to explain why she had continued down the same dark path even after everything had changed. Amina broke down, confessing everything. She spoke of the addiction, the need for drugs, and the despair she had never been able to escape. She explained how her grandmother's teachings had shaped her, how she had never known any other way of life. Michael listened, but his heart was broken. The woman he had married, the woman he had tried to save, was still trapped in the cycle of pain and addiction. In the end, Michael could not continue living with Amina. The betrayal was too deep, and the trust was broken beyond repair. He told her to leave, to go back to where she came from, and find a way to break free from the darkness that had consumed her. Amina left the house, her heart heavy with regret. She returned to the village of Nyeriga, but she knew that she had lost the only person who had ever truly loved her. She was alone once again, but this time, she could no longer escape the consequences of her actions. In the days that followed, Amina wandered the streets of Nyeriga, numb and lost. She thought about her children, the ones she had sold, and the life she had destroyed. The drugs no longer brought her comfort, only a hollow reminder of her failures. One evening, an elder from the village, a wise woman who had seen much in her long life, approached Amina. The elder spoke of redemption, of how it was never too late to change. Amina listened, the words sinking deep into her soul. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. Amina knew it would not be easy. She entered a rehabilitation program, seeking to break free from her addiction once and for all. The process was grueling, and there were many setbacks. But each day she fought to overcome the darkness that had consumed her for so long. Amina began to rebuild her life, brick by brick. She sought forgiveness from herself and from God. She worked in the fields, helping others in the village, and began to focus on the future she had almost destroyed. Over time, Amina found peace. She realized that she had been given a purpose that went beyond the life of addiction and despair she had known. She worked to help the children of Nyeriga, teaching them about love, respect, and the importance of family. Through faith and hard work, Amina found her way back to the woman she was meant to be. She had broken free from the temptations that once ruled her life, and with the help of God, she found redemption.